When you think of Imagine Dragons, what's the first thing that hits you? Maybe it's the dark, brooding energy of Radioactive, or maybe it's the power of Believer. One thing is clear, Dan Reynolds' voice isn't just part of the music, it is the music. Let's go back to 2012. Imagine Dragons were just breaking out, and their debut album, Night Visions, gave us their signature sound. Its time introduced us to that distinct, booming vocal style. But then came Radioactive, and everything changed. Dan Reynolds' voice became a force, gritty, explosive, and impossible to ignore. With Smoke and Mirrors, Imagine Dragons took their sound even deeper. I Bet My Life showcased a more vulnerable side, proving that power doesn't always come from volume, it comes from emotion. Then came Evolve, an album that fully embraced vocal experimentation. Take Thunder. It was a bold shift, but it worked, showing how the band could reinvent themselves without losing their identity. And then there was Whatever It Takes, proving their ability to blend rock, pop, and hip-hop influences seamlessly. On Origins, the vocals became even more expressive. Natural made every word feel powerful and intense, while Bad Liar showed pure vulnerability and a different side of their storytelling. Fast forward to Mercury, Act 1 and 2, and Imagine Dragons pushed their vocal range even further. Enemy blended genres effortlessly, making it one of their most innovative tracks. And on Bones, they proved once again that their sound is always evolving. Through every album, Imagine Dragons have used Dan Reynolds' voice as their most powerful instrument. Whether it's a whisper, a roar, or something completely unexpected, his delivery transforms every song into an experience. At the core of Imagine Dragons' early sound was Dan Reynolds' unmistakable voice, raw, anthemic, and filled with power. Radioactive wasn't just a song, it was a statement. His voice brought a sense of urgency that made every word feel monumental. And while Night Visions introduced the world to Imagine Dragons, it was more than just a debut album. It was the foundation of a sound that blended rock, electronic, and pop, with Dan's voice leading the charge. But not every track was built on power alone. Demons showed a different side, one of vulnerability and reflection. His delivery was more restrained, but just as impactful. It was proof that Imagine Dragons weren't just making music, they were creating anthems that connected deeply with people. From the explosive grit of Radioactive to the heartfelt honesty of Demons, Night Visions wasn't just an album. It was the beginning of a voice that would shape modern rock. What made this era truly special was how Imagine Dragons built a deep connection with their listeners. Dan Reynolds' voice wasn't just powerful, it was personal. Demons became more than just a song. Fans described it as an anthem of vulnerability, creating a bond between the band and their audience. This raw, emotional authenticity became a defining trait of their music. By 2013, Imagine Dragons were everywhere. Night Visions had gone platinum, and their music dominated airwaves. But what kept people hooked wasn't just the melodies, it was Dan Reynolds' voice. Radioactive elevated their sound, proving that his voice wasn't just an instrument, it was a declaration. The rasp, the urgency, the sheer power, it all made the song larger than life. What truly set Imagine Dragons apart was their ability to shift vocal styles seamlessly. Reynolds could unleash a soaring, almost ethereal delivery, like on Bleeding Out. But just as easily, he could pull it back to something lighthearted and celebratory, like on Top of the World. This ability to move between intensity and tenderness became one of the band's signatures, always anchored by Reynolds' distinct voice. By the time Smoke plus Mirrors arrived in 2015, Imagine Dragons had solidified their place at the top of rock music, but their sound and Dan's voice was evolving again. This album carried a darker, more introspective tone, and his vocals reflected that shift. I Bet My Life pushed his vocals to new emotional depths, while Shots showed just how much he could communicate through his delivery alone. Throughout Smoke plus Mirrors, Dan Reynolds' voice wasn't just powerful, it was evolving. He had moved beyond the youthful energy of Night Visions into something more refined, more deliberate. Gold showcased a new level of vocal control, proving that he wasn't just singing, he was storytelling. This era signaled a band ready to explore deeper emotions, and Reynolds' voice was at the core of that transformation. Then came 2017, and Evolve changed everything. Imagine Dragons had entered a new era, and so had Dan Reynolds' voice. Believer took everything fans loved about his intensity and sharpened it into something even more refined. His rasp wasn't just a signature, it became a tool, adding weight to every lyric. But Evolve wasn't just about power, it was about versatility. Thunder introduced a new vocal style, proving that Reynolds could bring lightness and energy just as easily as he could bring grit. And then, in stark contrast, Whatever It Takes showed him reaching new heights, blending emotion and intensity like never before. On Evolve, Dan Reynolds had truly found his vocal sweet spot. He could shift from a whisper to a roar in an instant, effortlessly moving between delicate falsettos and full throttle power. Evolve proved that he wasn't just a one-dimensional singer. His voice was a force shaping the emotional landscape of every song. As Imagine Dragons continued to evolve, their sound reflected more than just musical shifts. It was a transformation in Dan Reynolds' vocal delivery. With Origins 2018, the band embraced a more experimental approach, blending rock, pop, and electronic elements. Natural stripped everything back, allowing Reynolds' vocals to take center stage with pure emotion. But this era wasn't just about power, it was about range. Bad Liar showcased a more delicate, almost trance-like delivery. Reynolds didn't need to force his voice, he let the emotion carry it, proving his ability to adapt to any sound. Then came Mercury, Act 1, 2021, an album that marked a shift toward reflection and vulnerability. This time, Reynolds' voice wasn't just leading the charge, it was opening up in ways we hadn't heard before. Follow You proved that power isn't always about volume, it's about emotion. And then there was Wrecked. The song became a defining moment for Reynolds as a vocalist. He had grown from the urgent intensity of Night Visions into an artist who could channel deep emotion without losing the force that made him stand out. With Mercury, Act 2 on the horizon, one thing is clear. Imagine Dragons are still evolving, and so is Dan Reynolds' voice. From raw anthems to introspective ballads, his ability to shapeshift between strength, sorrow, and swagger has made Imagine Dragons a band unlike any other. What's your favorite Imagine Dragons era? Which song best showcases Dan Reynolds' voice? Let me know down below.